Stop playing pretend entrepreneur, sister announced at family dinner. Your little online thing isn't real business, everyone laughed. I nodded quietly, understood. Monday morning I emailed my investment firm, pulled a $150 million from Sarah's tech startup. The board meeting was emergency called. The crystal chandelier above our parents' dining table cast prismatic shadows across 23 plates of untouched filet mignon. My sister Sarah stood at the head of the table, wine glass raised like she was accepting an Academy Award instead of just announcing her Series B funding round. To family, she declared, her voice carrying that particular pitch of triumph she'd perfected since Yale. And to those of us who took the real risks in business. I was cutting into my asparagus when she turned to me. The smile on her face could have stripped paint. Speaking of which, Meredith, how's your little? What do you call it? Your online thing? Sarah swirled her Bordeaux, a 2009 Chateau Margaux that Dad had been saving for something special. Apparently my humiliation qualified. Still playing around with that website from your apartment? My mother's fork paused midway to her mouth. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. Around the table, my aunts, uncles, cousins, and Sarah's fiancé Bradley all shifted in their seats with the uncomfortable energy of spectators at a car crash. I work in digital asset management, I said quietly, keeping my eyes on my plate. Digital asset management? Sarah repeated the words like they were a punchline she was testing out. That's a creative way to describe posting on social media all day. Very entrepreneurial of you to rebrand unemployment. My cousin Amanda snorted into her napkin. Uncle Robert raised his eyebrows in that way that said he agreed but was too polite to voice it. Sarah, that's enough, my mother said, but her tone was gentle, almost apologetic. Apologizing to Sarah for having to witness my mediocrity, probably. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, Mom. Sarah set down her glass and leaned back in her chair with the confidence of someone who'd just closed a $60 million funding round. It's been 8 years since Meredith graduated from Northwestern. 8 years of this vague I work online explanation. Meanwhile, some of us built actual companies with actual employees and actual revenue. She gestured around the table like she was presenting evidence to a jury. I have 73 employees now. 73 people depending on me for their paychecks, their health insurance, their careers. I'm creating real value in the world. Her eyes landed back on me. What are you creating, Mare? Instagram posts? The silence that followed could have suffocated a small animal. It's fine, I said, setting down my fork with deliberate care. Different paths for different people. Stop being so passive about this. Sarah leaned forward, and I recognized the expression on her face. It was the same one she'd worn in high school when she convinced our parents I'd been the one who crashed Mom's Mercedes. I'd been at a Model UN conference 300 miles away, but Sarah had been convincing enough that they'd grounded me for 2 months anyway. You're 31 years old, Meredith. You live in a studio apartment. You drive a 7-year-old Honda. You buy your clothes at Target. Nothing wrong with Target, my Aunt Linda murmured, but nobody acknowledged her. I'm worried about you, Sarah continued, and her voice had shifted into that false sweetness that made my teeth ache. We're all worried. This fantasy that you're running some kind of business from your laptop needs to end. It's time to face reality. Maybe you could get a real job? I could talk to our HR department if you want. We're hiring customer service representatives. Around the table, heads nodded. Sympathetic looks were exchanged. My father finally spoke. Your sister has a point, Meredith. We've been patient, but maybe it's time to consider a more traditional career path. Something stable. I looked at each of them in turn. Sarah with her shark smile. Bradley examining his manicured fingernails. My parents wearing matching expressions of parental concern. My extended family radiating pity. Stop playing pretend entrepreneur, Sarah announced, like she was diagnosing a medical condition. Your little online thing isn't real business. Someone laughed. Then someone else. Soon the whole table was chuckling, a gentle patronizing sound that settled over me like fog. I nodded slowly. Understood. Good. Sarah raised her glass again. Now that we've cleared the air, let's toast to actual success. To my Series B round, $200 million, with Camden Ventures leading the investment at $150 million. My water glass stopped halfway to my lips. Camden Ventures, my father confirmed proudly. Your mother and I were so pleased when they came in as Sarah's lead investor. Meredith helped make some introductions through her college network, didn't you? Every face turned toward me. I made some connections, I said carefully. Don't be modest. Sarah was beaming now, magnanimous in victory. My little sister might not know how to run a business, but she does have some useful connections from her college days. Those Northwestern networking events finally paid off for someone. She had no idea. None of them did. Camden Ventures wasn't something I'd recommended. Camden Ventures was something I owned. I'd founded it 8 years ago, shortly after negotiations with Google concluded. The sale of my first company, a data analytics platform I built junior year, had taken 11 months of due diligence and negotiations. The deal closed for $80 million when I was 23, fresh out of Northwestern. I'd been too exhausted from years of building something real while maintaining a 4.0 GPA to correct people's assumptions about what I did all day. The studio apartment Sarah mocked? I owned the building. All 42 units. The Honda? I liked it. It was reliable and didn't attract attention, unlike the McLaren in my private garage downtown. Target close? Why not? Nobody I did business with cared about labels. I'd let them all believe what they wanted because it was easier than explaining. Easier than dealing with the jealousy, the requests for money, the sudden appearance of cousins who needed startup funding or parents who'd made bad investments and needed bailouts. I kept my success quiet because I'd watched what happened to my prep school friend Jessica when she sold her app for $200 million. Her family had become a circus of extended relatives crawling out of the woodwork with their hands out. Her own mother had tried to sue her for emotional damages for not being given enough money. So I'd hidden. I'd dressed down. I'd smiled and nodded when people assumed I was struggling. And I'd built Camden Ventures into one of the most successful venture capital firms in North America, with a portfolio of 37 companies and total assets under management exceeding $4 billion. Sarah's company, TechFlow Solutions, was our largest single investment. We'd led her Series B round with $150 million of a total $200 million raise. Not because I'd wanted to help my sister, but because my investment team had identified it as a solid opportunity in the enterprise software space. I hadn't recused myself from the vote. I hadn't told anyone on my board that the CEO was my sister. I'd used my legal middle name, Meredith Ann, for Camden's paperwork while Sarah knew me as Meredith Jane at home. She had no idea who actually owned the company keeping her dream alive. Well, this has been lovely, I said, setting my napkin beside my plate. But I should get going. Hot date with your laptop? Sarah asked, and the table laughed again. I smiled. Something like that. The drive back to my studio apartment took 40 minutes through light Saturday night traffic. I sat in my reliable Honda and thought about my sister's face. About the casual cruelty in her voice. About the way everyone had nodded along like she was speaking obvious truths. I thought about the 73 employees she'd bragged about. Good people, most of them. I'd reviewed their profiles when our due diligence team had vetted the company. Software engineers, designers, salespeople, customer success managers. People with families and mortgages and student loans. In my apartment, I made chamomile tea that sat by my window overlooking Lake Michigan. The city lights reflected off the water like scattered diamonds. I lived on the top floor. The building had no dedicated doorman, just a security system with an intercom. I owned all 42 units, a fact I'd never shared with anyone in my family. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, "Don't take what Sarah said to heart. She just wants what's best for you." I didn't respond. Sleep came eventually, but it was thin and unsatisfying. Sunday I spent reviewing TechFlow's financials. Our quarterly board meeting was scheduled for Tuesday, but I wanted to be thorough. The numbers told an interesting story. Sarah's company was burning through cash faster than projected. Their customer acquisition costs were rising. 3 of their major clients had churned in the last quarter. The Series B funding had given them an 18-month runway, maybe 24 if they were careful. Without Camden's continued support, they'd have 6 months. Maybe 8. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline autumn sunshine that makes Chicago look like a postcard. I made coffee in my French press, dressed in jeans and a Northwestern sweatshirt, and opened my laptop. At 9:47 a.m., I composed an email to Marcus Chen, Camden Ventures' Chief Operating Officer. Marcus, I need to schedule an emergency board meeting for this afternoon at 4 p.m. to discuss our TechFlow investment. Please prepare documentation for a potential withdrawal of Camden funding, citing material breach, CEO conduct inconsistent with company values. I'll explain everything in the meeting. M.A. Reeves. I hit send and took a sip of coffee. My phone rang 8 minutes later. Meredith. Marcus's voice was careful. Can you walk me through this? TechFlow is one of our strongest performers. CEO has demonstrated judgment issues that create reputational risk for Camden, I said calmly. I'll provide full details in the board meeting. I want everyone to hear this at the same time and vote properly. This is going to create significant problems for them if the board votes to withdraw. They've already allocated a substantial portion of those funds. I'm aware. A pause. This wouldn't have anything to do with personal matters? Marcus was the only person at Camden who knew about my family connection. I'd had to tell him during the due diligence phase. This is about protecting Camden's interests and reputation, I said. The CEO publicly humiliated a member of her investor team without knowing who they were. That demonstrates catastrophically poor judgment and creates liability concerns. Another pause. You're the boss. I'll have the paperwork ready by 3, and I'll send the board meeting invite now. The calendar invite went out at 10:02 a.m., urgent, emergency board meeting TechFlow investment, 4 p.m. today. Sarah called me at 11:31. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 11:33, 11:35, and 11:40. The calls were puzzling. How could she know about the board meeting already? Marcus wouldn't have told her. Then I realized, someone on Camden's board must have reached out to her for context. Word traveled fast in venture capital circles. At 11:47, my father called. Meredith Jane, what the hell is going on? His voice was shaking. Sarah just got some kind of notice from her investors. They're pulling their funding. She says you have something to do with this? Camden Ventures is withdrawing from TechFlow Solutions. Camden? You mean the company you introduced them to? The company I own, Dad. The silence on the other end of the line was so complete I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. You. What? I founded Camden Ventures 6 years ago. I'm the majority shareholder and CEO. Sarah's company exists because I invested in it. Now I'm divesting. This is insane. You can't just. I can, actually. It's in the contract. Material breach clause. Sarah's behavior at dinner Saturday constituted a public attack on a member of her investment team. That's me, in case that wasn't clear. You're destroying your sister's company because she hurt your feelings? The accusation in his voice was sharp enough to cut. I'm protecting my company's reputation and assets, I said quietly. If Sarah's judgment is so poor that she'll publicly attack people she doesn't recognize as crucial to her business, what other blind spots does she have? What other relationships is she destroying without realizing the consequences? Meredith, please. My father's voice cracked. Your mother and I invested everything in Sarah's company. Our retirement savings. The house. If this falls apart, my coffee mug stopped halfway to my mouth. You did what? Sarah needed bridge funding last year between Series A and Series B. She was running out of runway and negotiations with Camden were taking longer than expected. We believed in her. My stomach dropped. That made sense now. They'd invested their retirement savings to keep Sarah's company alive until the Series B closed. It was reckless and foolish, but it tracked. You mortgaged the house? We took out a second mortgage, yes. And we liquidated most of our retirement accounts. But that's not the point. The point is that you need to fix this. Sarah made a mistake, fine. She apologized. She hasn't apologized. She will. Just tell these Camden people to reconsider. I'm the Camden people, Dad. I hung up before he could respond. The board meeting started at 4 p.m. sharp. 12 faces on video screens, all of them wearing variations of concern and confusion. Marcus presented the situation. Meredith has requested we withdraw all funding from TechFlow Solutions and invoke our material breach clause. Before we vote, I think we need to understand the reasoning. I unmuted myself. Sarah Reeves, TechFlow CEO, publicly attacked and humiliated me at a family dinner this past Saturday. She was unaware that I'm the principal stakeholder in Camden Ventures. Her behavior demonstrates a pattern of poor judgment that creates reputational and operational risk for our firm. Board member Priya Sharma spoke up. With respect, Meredith, personal family dynamics shouldn't drive investment decisions. This isn't about hurt feelings, I replied. It's about judgment. Sarah built a company without understanding who her investors were. She destroyed a relationship without recognizing its value. If she's that blind to her own cap table, what else is she missing? What other crucial relationships is she damaging? What other risks is she creating? The company is performing well, another board member pointed out. The company is burning cash faster than projected and has elevated churn, I countered. Without our continued support, they have 6 months of runway. Maybe 8. Sarah's leadership is creating risk we didn't account for in our initial assessment. Marcus pulled up a slide showing TechFlow's updated financial projections. The board discussed for 47 minutes. The vote was 8-4 in favor of withdrawal. At 5:13 p.m., TechFlow's board received formal notice that Camden Ventures was exercising its right to withdraw funding and demanding immediate repayment of the full $150 million investment. Sarah called me 16 times between 5:15 and 6 p.m. My phone buzzed with a text from Bradley, Sarah's fiancé. You're making a huge mistake. Sarah's company is worth 10 times what you invested. This is just petty. I replied, then she'll have no problem finding other investors. He didn't text back. At 6:23, she showed up at my apartment building. The intercom buzzed. I checked the security camera feed on my phone and saw Sarah standing at the entrance, looking disheveled and desperate. I pressed the button to unlock the door. Come up. 4th floor. I was pouring a second cup of coffee when Sarah hammered on my door. She looked like she'd been crying. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was disheveled, and she was still wearing what looked like her work clothes from earlier. You can't do this, she said without preamble. You can't just destroy everything I've built because I hurt your feelings. Come in, I said, stepping aside. She stormed into my studio apartment, spinning around to face me. Mom and Dad mortgaged the house for me, Meredith. Did they tell you that? Our childhood home. If TechFlow goes under, they lose everything. You should have thought about that before you humiliated me in front of our entire family. I didn't know. Her voice broke. How was I supposed to know you were secretly some venture capital mogul? You live in a studio apartment. You drive a piece of shit car. You dress like you shop at thrift stores. I like my apartment. I like my car. And I do shop at thrift stores sometimes. They have great stuff. She stared at me like I was speaking another language. Why didn't you tell anyone? The question came out as almost a whisper. Because of this. I gestured at her, at the desperation radiating off her in waves. Because the second people know you have money, you stop being a person and start being a resource. An ATM machine. A solution to everyone else's problems. So you just... what? Hid? Let everyone think you were a failure? I let people think whatever they wanted to think. You're the one who decided I was a failure, Sarah. You made that assumption. You built that narrative. Nobody forced you to mock me at dinner. She sank onto my couch, her head in her hands. Please, she said. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was awful to you. I know I was. But please don't do this. 73 people are going to lose their jobs. Mom and Dad are going to lose their house. Bradley and I were supposed to get married in June. You could have been kind, I said softly. That's all it would have taken. Just basic human kindness? I know. You could have asked about my work instead of mocking it. You could have been curious instead of contemptuous. You could have treated me like a person instead of a punchline. I know. She was crying now, really crying. I was jealous, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I was jealous because you always made everything look so easy. School was easy for you. Friends were easy for you. You got into Northwestern with a full ride while I had to beg for a spot at Yale. You sold your first company for millions before I even had a business plan written. I blinked. You knew about that? Of course I knew. I'm not an idiot. I knew you sold something to Google right after graduation. I knew you had money. I just didn't know how much. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. And it made me crazy. Because I was supposed to be the successful one. I was supposed to be the one Mom and Dad bragged about. But you just did everything better without even trying. You think I didn't try? My voice was sharper than I'd intended. You think building a company while maintaining a 4.0 GPA in college was easy? You think negotiating with Google for almost a year while finishing my senior thesis was something I just stumbled into? You think managing billions of dollars in investments is simple? No, I worked, Sarah. I worked harder than you can possibly imagine. I just didn't need to announce it at every family dinner. She looked up at me, mascara streaked down her face. What do I have to do? How do I fix this? I sat down in the chair across from her. I don't know if you can. There has to be something. Please. I'll do anything. I thought about my 73 employees. I thought about my parents' house. I thought about Sarah standing at the head of the dinner table, wine glass raised, casual cruelty dripping from every word. I want a public apology, I said finally. At the next family dinner. In front of everyone who was there Saturday night. You tell them exactly what happened. You tell them who I am and what I do. You tell them that you were wrong. Done. Absolutely. What else? I want you to implement a mandatory respect and communication training program for all TechFlow employees, starting with the leadership team. If you're this blind to relationships that matter, your company culture needs work. She nodded frantically. Yes. Of course. Anything else? I want you to set up a genuine profit-sharing program for your employees. Not stock options that might be worth something someday. Real quarterly profit distributions. That will impact our margins. Then impact your margins. You bragged about 73 people depending on you. Start treating them like partners instead of resources. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. If I do all of this, she said finally, will Camden reinvest? Maybe. The board will need to vote on it. Probably not the full $150 million, we'd need to see sustained improvement first. But enough to give you runway while you find other investors. I leaned back in my chair. And Sarah? Those other investors are going to ask why Camden pulled out. You're going to have to explain that your CEO demonstrated catastrophically poor judgment. That's going to make fundraising difficult. So I'm screwed either way. You're facing consequences. There's a difference. She stood up, wiping her face one more time. I'll send you the training program outlined by Friday. And the profit-sharing proposal. Have your COO send them to Marcus. This needs to go through proper channels now. She nodded and walked toward the door. With her hand on the knob, she paused. For what it's worth, she said without turning around, I really am sorry. Not just because of the money. I was cruel to you. I've been cruel to you for years. You didn't deserve that. No, I agreed. I didn't. After she left, I sat in my apartment watching the city lights reflect off the lake. My phone was full of messages from family members, ranging from angry to confused to pleading. I didn't answer any of them. The next family gathering was scheduled for 3 weeks later, Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house. Sarah had texted me the date, along with a simple message, please come. I need to make this right. When Thanksgiving arrived, it came with unseasonable warmth and clear skies. The same dining room, the same crystal chandelier, the same place settings, though this time, only 20 people instead of 23. Some relatives had apparently decided to skip the drama. But everything was different. Sarah stood at the head of the table, but this time she wasn't holding a wine glass. Her hands were shaking slightly as she looked around at our assembled family. I need to say something, she began. 3 weeks ago, at our last family dinner, I said some terrible things about Meredith. I mocked her work, her life, her choices. I called her a pretend entrepreneur. I suggested she was a failure. The table was silent. I was wrong. Completely, catastrophically wrong. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Meredith isn't a failure. She's the founder and CEO of Camden Ventures, one of the largest venture capital firms in the country. She manages over $4 billion in assets. She's been quietly successful for years while I assumed she was struggling. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. She's also the primary investor in my company, Sarah continued. The $150 million I was so proud of raising? That came from Meredith's firm. My company's success exists because my sister believed in my business model, even after years of me treating her with contempt. Uncle Robert started to say something, but Sarah held up her hand. Last week, I almost lost everything because I was too arrogant and too blind to recognize what was right in front of me. I humiliated someone I should have respected, and it nearly destroyed my company and 73 people's livelihoods. She finally looked directly at me. Meredith gave me a chance to make this right. I don't know if I deserve it, but I'm grateful for it. She sat down. The silence that followed was different from 2 weeks ago. This wasn't the uncomfortable silence of witnessing someone else's humiliation. This was the stunned silence of having your entire understanding of reality shift. My father spoke first. Meredith, is this true? Yes. All of it? All of it? My mother was crying quietly. Why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted to build something without it being about family drama or expectations or money, I said simply. I wanted to succeed or fail on my own terms. And you succeeded, my Aunt Linda said, and there was something like wonder in her voice. Dinner continued, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed. People asked me questions about my work with genuine curiosity. My cousin Amanda apologized for laughing at Sarah's jokes. Bradley tried to pitch me on a real estate investment opportunity until Sarah kicked him under the table. After dessert, Sarah pulled me aside in the kitchen. Marcus approved a revised investment structure, she said quietly. $75 million to replace what we've already spent, pending implementation of the training program and profit sharing. The board voted on it yesterday. I know. He copied me on the board resolution. Thank you. For giving me another chance. For not letting my employees suffer for my mistakes. Don't thank me yet. You've got a lot of work ahead of you. TechFlow's culture needs serious improvement, and the other investors are watching closely. I know. I'm starting with myself. She picked up a dish towel and started drying wine glasses. I hired an executive coach. First session is next Tuesday. Who'd you hire? Rebecca Morrison. Marcus recommended her. I nodded slowly. Rebecca was excellent. Tough but fair. She'd worked with 3 of our other portfolio CEOs on leadership development. She's good. Listen to her. I plan to. Sarah set down a dried glass and picked up another. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really invest in TechFlow? Was it because you believed in the company, or because you wanted to help me? It was a fair question. I'd asked myself the same thing dozens of times over the past 18 months. Both, I admitted. The company had strong fundamentals. Good product, solid market fit, reasonable growth trajectory. Any competent VC would have considered it. But would I have pushed as hard for Camden to lead the round if you weren't the CEO? Probably not. So you were helping me? I was investing in a company run by someone whose work ethic I'd witnessed firsthand. You've always been driven, Sarah. Sometimes to the point of destruction, but driven nonetheless. That counts for something in the startup world. She was quiet for a moment, processing this. I used to hate how easy everything seemed for you, she said finally. You got straight A's without studying. You made friends without trying. You built a successful company while I was still trying to figure out my business plan. It made me feel inadequate. Everything wasn't easy for me. I just didn't advertise when things were hard. Why not? I thought about late nights in my dorm room, debugging code until my eyes burned. I thought about the panic attacks I'd had during my first investor pitch, locked in a bathroom stall trying to remember how to breathe. I thought about the day Google's acquisition team called with their offer and I cried for 3 hours straight because I finally felt like I'd proven something. Because asking for help felt like admitting weakness, I said. And in our family, weakness was dangerous. Sarah looked at me sharply. What do you mean? Come on, Sarah. You know what our family is like. Dad only respects success. Mom only values achievement. We were raised to believe that struggle equals failure. That's not, she stopped. Okay. Maybe that's true. It is true. So I learned to hide the struggle. I learned to make everything look effortless so nobody would see me as less than. And I made it worse by mocking you whenever you seemed to be struggling. Yeah. You did. We stood there in the kitchen, 2 sisters finally being honest with each other for maybe the first time in our adult lives. I don't know if we can have a normal relationship, Sarah said. Too much has happened. Probably not. But maybe we can have an honest one. I'd settle for that. We finished drying the glasses in silence, but it was a different kind of silence. Less hostile. More contemplative. Before she left, Sarah turned to me one more time. The employee who wrote that complained about me calling them at 11 p.m. on a Saturday, Marcus showed me the reports today. I want to apologize to them directly. All of them. That's between you and your team. I know. But I wanted you to know I'm taking this seriously. Not just because of the money. Because you were right about the culture problems. After she left, I texted Marcus, how did she get access to the complaint reports? His response was immediate, I gave them to her. She needs to understand the full scope of the problem if she's going to fix it. Hope that was okay. It's fine. Good call, actually. She cried in my office for 20 minutes after reading them. Good. She should cry. Maybe it'll sink in. You Reeve sisters are terrifying. We learned from the best. 2 months later, I moved out of my studio apartment. Not because Sarah had embarrassed me into it, but because I finally felt ready to stop hiding. The penthouse wasn't about showing off. It was about finally admitting to myself that I'd earned the right to live somewhere beautiful. That success wasn't something to apologize for or hide from. The day I moved in, I invited Jessica over for wine on the terrace. "This view is insane," she said, looking out over the lake. "Why did you ever live in that studio?" "Safety, I guess. If nobody knew I had money, nobody could take it from me." "Metaphorically or literally?" "Both." She clinked her glass against mine. "To finally living like the successful badass you are." "I'll drink to that." We watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The city lights began flickering on below us, one by one, like stars being born. "How are things with Sarah?" Jessica asked. "Different. Not fixed, but different. She's actually following through on the changes. The executive coaching seems to be helping." "Think you two will ever be close?" "I don't know. Maybe close isn't the goal. Maybe just respectful is enough." "Respectful is underrated." My phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject line: TechFlow Q3 results. I opened it. Revenue was up 23%. Customer churn was down to 3%. Employee satisfaction scores had improved by 42 percentage points. And there was a note at the bottom from Sarah: "Thank you for the second chance. We're not wasting it." I showed the email to Jessica. "Looks like your tough love approach worked," she said. "Looks like it." But I knew better than to declare victory too early. Changing company culture took years, not months. Sarah had made progress, but there was still a long road ahead. Still, it was a start. The next family gathering was my parents' 40th anniversary party. Sarah had offered to host it at her new house. She and Bradley had finally bought a place in Evanston, but Mom had insisted on keeping it at their house. The same house that had almost been foreclosed on 3 months earlier. I arrived at 6 p.m. with a bottle of very expensive champagne and low expectations. My father opened the door. He looked older than I remembered, more worn down. "Meredith," he said, and there was something uncertain in his voice. Like he wasn't sure if I'd bite. "Hi, Dad. Come in. Your mother's in the kitchen." The house was full of relatives, the same faces from that disastrous dinner months ago. But this time when I walked in, the conversations didn't stop. People didn't look away. Uncle Robert actually approached me. "Meredith, I wanted to apologize for laughing that night. I didn't understand the situation." "It's fine." "It's not, actually. I should have spoken up regardless. It was cruel, what Sarah said." I looked at him carefully, trying to assess if this was genuine or performative. "I appreciate you saying that." He nodded and moved away, and I realized that news of my success had fundamentally altered how people saw me. I wasn't the disappointing niece anymore. I was the successful one whose goodwill they suddenly wanted to maintain. It should have felt good. Mostly it felt exhausting. My mother found me on the back porch, where I'd escaped for some air. "You came," she said. "You're my mother. It's your anniversary." Of course I came. I wasn't sure. After everything that happened. We stood there in awkward silence. She was still my mother, but the distance between us felt vast. "Why didn't you tell me you were struggling financially?" I asked finally. "We weren't struggling. We were investing. In Sarah's company, with money you couldn't afford to lose. We believed in her." "Did you ever believe in me?" The question hung in the air between us. My mother looked away. "You never seem to need our belief," she said quietly. "You always seem so self-sufficient. So sure of yourself." I was 23 years old, Mom. I needed you to be proud of me. We were proud. We are proud. You had a funny way of showing it. She turned to face me then, and I saw tears in her eyes. "I know. I know we failed you in that way. Your father and I, we didn't understand what you were building. It seemed so abstract. So intangible. Sarah's company made sense to us. Office space, employees, products we could touch. And mine didn't. Not at first. But Meredith, when we found out what you'd actually accomplished." She trailed off. "We didn't know whether to be impressed or ashamed that we'd missed it entirely. Both would be appropriate." She laughed wetly. "Yes. Both would be appropriate." We stood there watching the sunset, mother and daughter, trying to bridge years of misunderstanding with one awkward conversation. "For what it's worth," she said eventually, "I'm glad you made Sarah face consequences. She needed to learn that lesson." I just wish it hadn't taken her almost losing everything to learn it. Some lessons only stick when the stakes are real. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, Mom. You just weren't paying attention. She winced, but she didn't argue. Progress, I supposed. Inside, Sarah was circulating through the party with Bradley in tow. When she saw me, she excused herself and came over. Can we talk? Privately? We ended up in my old childhood bedroom, which my parents had converted into a guest room. The walls were now painted beige instead of the purple I'd chosen at age 12. How are things really going? I asked. With the company, I mean. Better. Hard, but better. Rebecca's been pushing me to examine why I need to belittle people to feel successful. And what have you discovered? That I'm deeply insecure and I've been compensating by putting others down, she said it matter-of-factly, like she was discussing the weather. Turns out years of comparing myself to you created some pretty unhealthy patterns. I wasn't trying to compete with you. I know that now. But teenage Sarah didn't know that. She just saw her little sister excelling at everything and felt threatened. I'm not your enemy, Sarah. I know. I'm trying to internalize that. She sat on the edge of the guest bed. I wanted to tell you that we've rolled out the profit-sharing program. First distribution goes out next month. How did the team react? Like I'd just announced free puppies for everyone. One of our senior engineers actually cried. She said it was the first time in her career she'd felt truly valued by leadership. That's good. It is good. It's also terrifying because now I have to actually follow through on treating people well, not just when you're watching, but all the time. Welcome to being a decent human being. It's harder than it looks. She smiled grimly. No kidding. We sat there for a few minutes, two sisters in a room that used to belong to one of them, trying to figure out how to move forward. I don't know if we'll ever be close, Sarah said. But I'm hoping we can at least be honest with each other. Someone else said something similar to me recently. Who? You, actually. 2 months ago in my kitchen. Oh. Right. She stood up. I should get back to the party. But Meredith? Thank you. For everything. For the second chance. For caring enough to make me face consequences. For not just walking away. After she left, I sat in that beige guest room for a long time, thinking about the purple walls that used to be here, and the girl who'd chosen that color and how far she'd come from that bedroom. Eventually I went back downstairs. The party was in full swing, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own family. Not quite an insider either. But somewhere in between. And maybe that was enough. We both drank to that.